I'm Lauren Whitehurst. I'm a certified personal trainer and certified nutrition coach.
Hi, I'm Sunny Lippincott. I'm a certified professional life coach and a certified brain health professional.
We also have Angela Salyers, who is a licensed professional counselor, and the three of us together make up
Whole Life Vitality.
We teach whole life vitality of the mind, body, and soul, bringing the physical, emotional, and spiritual together for whole life wellness. Yes. Welcome back, friends. We are here again with Trish, who is going to walk us through a little bit more about grief. This is our part 2. If you missed the first one, please go back and listen and or watch. We talked about some really great information regarding grief, but I really wanted to come back again and talk with Trish about some stories of people that she has walked through this grief process with. So I know you reached out to a few of these people and kind of ask them for permission to share their stories and what they would like shared. So if you want to share some of that with us, we'd love to hear about it.
I love it. My hope is that I feel like grief is so internal.
Yeah.
And so if we can get it out of ourselves somehow, whether that's through words or a punching bag and make sure to get an actual punching bag or
not a person.
Not a person, a setup, because it can leak into things. But I'm going to set up a spot where I can break some old dishes, find a Goodwill and break some old dishes, And anyway,
have you seen those smash places where you go?
I want to go to one.
Destroy whatever. Yeah,
I want to go to one so bad. Now, so my hope is that by giving us a place to share this grief and these things that we're going through, that it'll, it's a way to get it out of our bodies and to be understood and to feel heard and to find other people and reach other people. I don't really know why these things happen. Okay. I don't know. I mean, I know that death is a natural part of life, but I don't know why it has to be so horrible sometimes. Okay. Just to be blunt.
Well, just like what you said before, though, about loving, you love so deeply, and that makes the loss so much more impactful.
Yes.
The opposite of that, the only other option would be just to shut down your feelings completely, and then you go through life not loving.
Exactly. And I was actually listening to one of my favorite songs this morning, and it's one of those songs that kind of resonates no matter what you're going through in life. It is Adele, "To Be Loved."
Oh, and it's a beautiful song.
There's a part in it that says, all I do is bleed into someone else. And that's how a lot of my grief has kind of felt. Like, I just felt like if I didn't keep it inside me, I was just bleeding out of someone else. When I was listening to it this morning, just to relax, because it's a very grounding song for me, it just brought me back into some times in my life where I was in grief very heavily. I oftentimes welcome the grief now because I find that it helps me to reach out to the people that I know feel it as well. I feel like you could ask anyone, because everyone's going to go through grief, right? Everybody is going to. But you could ask anyone to share.
If you're not a sociopath, if you have feelings, then you at one point in your life, at some point or another, will grieve the loss of something.
Exactly. And so my feelings are that you could ask anybody this to come on the podcast. You could ask anyone to share their experiences with grief. I've found myself in a position where, like what you were saying earlier, I've met a lot of people. I care very deeply, and my own grief and experiences with it have kind of made me lean into other people. And so I, for lack of a better word, have collected grieving people, which also means I have a lot of my own grief.
Well, at one point you mentioned to me that you felt like you kind of found yourself in this position, almost like called to, or you were designed to then be in this space with these people as they walk through their end days, or as they kind of transition to whatever is next. And I just thought that was so beautiful, because it takes such a special person. It takes a huge amount of sacrifice on your part, because you know how it feels to grieve. I think a lot of people know how it feels to grieve. And the sacrifice is you are setting yourself up to love deeply, because you do, to love deeply someone that you know will only be with you for a short season. And that is just such a profound gift to give these people that you meet.
Yeah, it's interesting because I find that as I've leaned into people in this space, it like domino effects or something. Like it's like the more you are willing to sit in that space, the more people you find that need it, which is kind of a daunting thing to welcome into your life. But I didn't do it on purpose at first. Okay, so it was I don't know if the trajectory changed just from my own grief through going through some trauma, where dissociation became something that I was very used to.
Mhm.
And so whenever I witnessed someone going through some kind of grief, whether that be through death or through trauma or through something else, like I found that in common with them. I found dissociation in common. I found myself in so much pain that I was cutting myself off from the outside world and even from myself.
You and I went to a class at one point that was given by a therapist friend of ours. And I knew you well enough at that point for you to look at me at the end of this class, and you said, "What did you think?" And I'm just like smiling, and you go, "You're dissociating right now, aren't you?" And I was
You remember that?
yes. Oh,
I remember that.
because I remember it so deeply, because
You and I were
in
like
that moment,
laughing inappropriately.
so inappropriately, but the class was was it on grief? What was it on?
Probably, I don't know. Or
It was
love
on
languages,
something,
maybe. I
it
don't
was
know.
on something really, really that touched me so deeply that I immediately put up a wall. And
I think
when
it
you
might have been
said,
grief.
yeah, when
It
you
probably
said
was.
you're dissociating, aren't you? I was like, "What's that?" And you're like, you went somewhere else in your head. I was like, "Yes, that's what I'm doing right now."
I knew because I was doing it too.
Uh-huh.
I
But
knew.
I think that familiarity is what helps us feel connected to people. And so as you have gotten more comfortable dealing with grief and walking through those hard spaces with people, then you recognize it in other people as they're dealing with that. And then people see that you have that space to accept that uncomfortable part of them. And that's just beautiful. In our social norms, people say, "How are you?" And you say, "I'm fine." "How are you?" "I'm fine." And the people like you that are extremely empathetic, you could just kind of giggle and you're like, "No, really.
No,
How
really.
are you?"
That's the thing, is I don't know how to have conversations without really meaning my question. Anyway, so I think I'm talking around my grief on purpose because I'm avoiding it.
So tell us what you're having a hard time with today. Tell us what you're trying really hard not to share that you know you need to share.
Okay, so I got a phone call like literally 2 minutes before. No, we're supposed to start at 9:30 and it was like 9:27. And I get a phone call from my cousin Jameson. And I just saw him when I went to Utah. I had this really intense feeling like I needed to go home. And so I went home a couple weeks ago. And I centered my trip home around my niece and my cousin Bailey. And I didn't understand why. It was very random. I haven't really talked to Bailey a ton lately. We just have been like in our own directions in our own lives. And, you know, we were the closest as cousins. Like I was the closest to her as cousins. She's been through a lot. Anyway, so I reached out to her and before I went, I got us these.
I noticed
pins.
it was on it's a little dragonfly pendant that you're wearing on your sweater. It's beautiful.
I just got this for right before my trip with her. I got it for myself and for her because she loves brooches. I just was feeling like I needed to reach out. Like I just needed to reach out. And so when I got there, it became fairly evident why when we hung out and talked. And I was grateful for the guidance or the feelings that were stirring inside me. But I like to believe that it was our grandparents, which is why I have like my grandpa's jacket right here. Like, and I have like jewelry on that this is my earn necklace for my baby that I lost. Like it, I'm channeling everything I can because I'm struggling. Anyway, I got a call from my cousin Jameson, her brother, that she died last night. And I just sat there and I thought, there's so many things for you and I that have come up telling us to do this. And I don't claim to have some powerful knowledge or awareness that's going to make things better for everybody that hears it. That's not at all the aim. It's just, I just wanted people to see grief as it is and not in some fluffy light. And I wanted people to see it because I know that people who are experiencing it, see it, feel it, and need to be seen and heard. And I feel like it could only help. So here you go. Here's some real grief. I've been dissociating the first part of this by focusing on, what I have prepared, or focusing on just the conversation with you, because I can get lost in conversation. But I've been learning through all my friends' experiences these years that I don't have to avoid the emotions. They're going to come whether I'm ready for them or not.
Yeah.
And they're not going to come sometimes because my brain is in survival mode. Okay, that's going to happen too, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is okay. Like, it's not ideal, and don't live there forever. But if you need to compartmentalize, or if you need to dissociate for a minute, that is okay. That's our brain's natural way of taking a breather, but make it a breather. Don't live there.
I heard once as from someone who was encouraging through grief that a healthy way to try and manage that tendency to dissociate through the grief is to set a timer and just give yourself 10 or 15 minutes to just let it all fall out, just ugly cry, just process and just feel everything. When it's done, then let yourself move on to the next thing, or go back to dissociating, however it is you need to cope. But that way you're at least giving yourself the space to process it out. When I was in the thick of things with my sister, I drive around to see a lot of my clients, and I would get in the car and I would have 10 or 15 minutes as I'm driving, and I would just ugly cry the whole way there. And I probably showed up a puffy mess to every client for months, but I would just ugly cry the whole way there and just sob and gasp and just be miserable as I'm processing this grief. And I would get there and I would dry my tears and I would drink some water and I would move forward with being there in that space that I needed to be in. But just allowing yourself that space to feel what you need to feel. Trish, I wish I was there to give you a hug right now, friend.
Thanks. Thank you. I'll get through it. I just, after this, I'll probably be looking at plane tickets to go back. You know how yesterday I felt like some major imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
And you pep talked me out of it. That went away about 2 minutes before we started recording.
When you got that call.
Yeah.
So
I was like, all right, this is supposed to happen for sure.
For those of you that don't know, then Trish is also one of my coaching clients. And so I really get we're good friends, but I feel like we've gotten to go so much deeper because of the coaching that we do together. And I'm so grateful to get to be in that space with you. But the other day when we were coaching, she said something about diminishing her own grief. And I said, stop it. Hold up just a minute. And I started listing the things that she had been through. And of course, then, the floodgates open and that's what happens. But it's imposter syndrome when you feel like what you have experienced is so minimal, or you diminished your own experiences because you think, well, someone else's experience is so much bigger than mine or so much more profound than mine. But we need to also acknowledge ourselves and what we've been through. And when we do that, then we're even more able to share with others. So,
yeah, I love that. And I agree with that. I feel like I was asking everyone else for their perspectives on it.
Mhm.
It was like I was forgetting I had my own, and I think I was just compartmentalizing and avoiding it. You know
Yep.
what I mean? And so I was just avoiding my own grief. So when you said that, I was like, dang it, Lord, you're right.
It is
There's
much
something in
easier
there,
to talk
guys.
about other people's stuff than it is to talk
So
about our
much
own stuff, for
easier.
sure. Mhm.
So much easier. But I feel like I become the support person, and then I avoid my own grief, and then I bottle it up. And like you said, sometimes comes out as secondary emotions like anger. I'm really glad that you called me out, because I needed to be grounded in my own grief before I could actually get into other people's grief and share it the way I want to share it,
Yeah.
and the way it deserves to be shared. It made me think of something though. I tend to absorb everyone's grief and avoid and neglect my own. And it reminded me something that my cousin Chelsea said. Chelsea is on the same side of the family as Bailey, the cousin that I just mentioned. So she is also going to be going through what I'm going through as well, but especially because she just lost her mother a few months ago
Mm.
to cancer, and it was rough. It was Chelsea, Shawnee, and Kylie, and I have a few things that they wrote about what grief feels like for them. Chelsea, this is what she said that kind of reminded me of that. She said, "I'm not sure if I've fully felt my own grief yet, or if I'm still just absorbing everyone else's. My compartmentalization skills are in overdrive, so I'm sure my time will come when it can't be pushed down any further." I do that. I do that.
I think a
She's the
lot of
type that
people do
stays.
that.
Yes. And she's the type that stays busy, so she's already has the tendency to do that. And then
Mhm.
her and I have talked about dissociation, and she also recognizes that in herself. And so she's just getting through it how she has to get through it. And but I talked to her, she seemed to feel almost ashamed of not feeling her own grief yet. No, it wasn't quite that. I think it was more that at the time that she lost her mother, the same week she purchased a business. Okay. And can you even imagine going through all that? Like, huge forward movement life changes while the biggest person in your life just died. Like, can you even imagine that? But she pulled it off somehow. But now she's kind of in the wreckage afterwards, where, you know, the dust is settling, and now you have to like assess the injuries and
Mhm.
see if it's going to be okay, and, you know, figure out who you are, because you're
Yeah.
not the same. You're not the same. And so that's kind of where she's at. But her and I were talking we went to her restaurant with all of our cousins, including Bailey, and she was talking about this time in her life, and I sensed regret in her voice. And what I said to her was, grief does this thing to everyone where it makes it almost impossible to see into the future or look to the future, because we don't want a future without the person we just lost. Like,
Yeah, there's some
it
sort of
doesn't.
comfort in existing in the past where they still are.
Yes. And so the fact that you were able to make forward movement, like plans towards a business, you were looking towards the future, you shouldn't feel ashamed of that. That was actually pretty impressive, because most people cannot do that. And maybe your dissociation gave you that gift to get through it. Whatever you had to do, you're through it, and now, well, like, let's take care of it, you know, like. And I could tell that got her thinking. And I hate when people shame themselves for how they grieve. You can't control how you grieve. Okay, let's just be honest. You can't control it. It's just going to hit you how it's going to hit you. You can find resources, you can access people and support, and you can channel it in productive or maybe just not destructive ways.
Right.
But
There are ways of kind of maneuvering
yes,
into healthier ways of grieving. But, and
yes,
just like we talked about the other day, you and I, people, and I say people, myself included, we like to think of grief as a linear line, as just a straight line. Like,
Yeah.
we're gonna go forward, we're gonna move through it, and then we're gonna get past it, and everything's gonna be fine, and I won't hurt anymore. When the reality is, it's not a straight line. It zigzags and bounces and swirls and does all over the place, and it does that, I think, for the rest of your life. And
yes,
as my grief comes up to the surface again and again, what I've noticed is it's like I've gotten familiar with it. I've gotten
Yeah.
familiar. I've gotten more comfortable with those
You like don't have a
feelings.
choice.
Well, and I've gotten so
just
familiar with
happens.
it that when it comes up, I'm like, oh, I remember you. And it's not so surprising and it's not so overwhelming. And the intensity is a shadow of the original feeling, but I still
Yes.
feel it. And I never know what's going to be the trigger that's going to trigger it, because inevitably something will. And it could just be as simple as seeing someone or smelling something or hearing a certain song or a certain phrase, or I never know. I never know what it's going to be. One of my all-time favorite songs was a song that I shared with my sister, and she and I both loved the song and the movie it was associated with. And I've always loved belting that song out in the car, and it comes on in the car now, and I'm like, because if I leave it on, then I'm going to cry through it, and I won't be able to sing to it anyway. And so sometimes I'll listen to it, and sometimes I will just, cry through it. And sometimes I will blubber my way trying to sing through it, but you just never know. And it's okay to let that grief just kind of take its natural course.
Yes. And I do find that over time, some people, not everyone, but some people will find comfort in objects that provide those moments for them.
Mm-hmm.
And some people think that's someone like not letting go, or not like, they're not, what are they supposed to let go of? I'm not going to tell someone to let go of their child, or to let go of their spouse.
The person is gone. You've let go. Like the person is, they're no longer here.
You're holding on to what you have of them.
If you have a memento that helps you remember those beautiful times that you had with them, then to each his own.
Yeah. It's like for me, it facilitates reminiscing in an affectionate way rather than a traumatic, devastating way. And I have a friend that lost her husband not that long ago to suicide. And she's talked about certain things that remind her, but that's also when you're incorporating a traumatic event into the situation. But she's talked about certain things that remind her in a traumatic way, but there are other things that are reminders of good times in their life. So if there are ways for people to help those who are grieving, like remember the people in their lives before they were sick or before the event, or because I think sometimes we focus so much on the event of their death and their absence that we forget to like live in their memory with the people that are left behind. And so like, let's be the people that are left behind with the people that were left behind.
My sister lost a child just a week before the baby was due. She lost her baby, and it was a very, very sad, very awful time for her. And she came to me and asked me if I would make her this cross stitch. She's the one who taught me how to cross stitch. She came and said, will you make this for me? And it was this really sweet needle point that had tiny little hands on top and tiny little feet on the bottom. And then in the middle, it said, a person's a person, no matter how small. That cute little Dr. Seuss quote. So then she displayed it on her wall and loved it. But I think that anything that you feel like you need to do to help you process that grief and remember that person in a positive way is wonderful.
Yes. I love that you did that. That's a really good example of a way to show up for someone in a way that it sounds like she requested it. Did she request that from you?
She did.
But it was a connection you already had.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She knew that I would do that. And she knew that I was available to be there for her in whatever way she needed at the time.
That's the point, is to be there for someone so that when they do come up with something, you're there. But something we were talking about made me think of something that she's kind of like a second mom. She's my mom's best friend. Her name's Tana. And her son, Dylan, him and I were raised together, basically. We're about the same age, same school year. Our moms have been best friends forever, so we were cradle. I don't like to say cradle to grave because that sounds really depressing, but basically that's what happened here. Anyway, so she said something. She said, remember, they're not so much stages of grief as flavors or waves of grief. Don't expect yourself to get through them in a prescribed lateral fashion. You will bounce around to the different responses depending on what memories are triggered and what surrounding stresses are influencing you. Just let them come as they do and use tools to process them in positive ways. Talk out loud to your loved ones, not just in your head. You can record conversations on your phone or use talk to text so you can keep it. Look back on conversations. It helps you process, kind of like journaling, like if you don't journal, at least find someone you can talk to, or like write emails to yourself or your notes pages. So that's been something that's been helpful for her. She also said, identify symbols that remind you of them and watch for them in the world. I watch for butterflies for Dylan and rays of sunlight since his middle name is Ray. I bring home heart rocks everywhere I go and write on the back where I found them. Whenever I see a butterfly, I just say hello to him and know he's sending me his love. When I see rays, it always makes me feel courageous, like he's reaching down to me from heaven, trying to fill me with light. She said so many beautiful things. I had friends a few years ago who passed away from COVID, and she was about my age. There's been a lot of young moms passing away, and so I think that that's why this is really resonating for me right now. Just like I can't help but just step into their shoes a little bit. Something that my friend Camille, she also lost a child, like you were talking about, to stillbirth. I've learned a lot from her experience with grief. And she wrote this: grief is an interesting thing. Losing a baby, losing a child, losing a loved one. Grief is anchored in the connection. We grieve because we love. We don't know who we are anymore. We have to start from square one, learn to talk, walk, and interact with the world again as a new person. Who am I? What is this world I live in? I cannot trust this world, God, the universe, others, or even myself. How will anything ever make sense again? As I support others on their grief journey, my goal is to help others grieve well so they can live and love well in their lifelong journey of mourning. I wanted to mention her because I have a lot of people who submitted things that I didn't get to, and I can find a different way to share that, and maybe we can link it. But because there was so much good stuff. But what I wanted to say is that I have a lot of people in Utah, and Camille, she started another nonprofit, and it's about grief and coping through grief and how to show up best for others, but also more specifically how to show up best for yourself. If you go to her Instagram, it's Wellness Farm Utah, or UT Wellness Farm.
Okay,
UT. Her name is
we'll
Camille.
link that in the podcast as well, so that people can see that.
Yeah, she's great. I think she's one of the reasons why I'm on the trajectory that I'm on. She taught me a lot about death and grief when she went through that stillbirth. She went about it in more unconventional ways than most people would think. And it really opened my eyes up to how we think about death, how we handle death, and grief, and like the options. And she's just a really great resource.
Everyone processes grief in a different way. And I think that it applies to everything when John Maxwell says comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that just across the board, comparison is the thief of joy. And if you start comparing your progress through grief to someone else's progress through grief, and you say, well, I'm doing it wrong, or they're doing it better than I am, or whatever, then all of a sudden you're dealing with grief and shame. And who wants to pile it on like that? That's not fun.
Yes. I have one thing that I want to share that my friend Maurice shared. She's the friend that I mentioned earlier, whose husband died by suicide. And that one is something that no one knows how to talk about, right? And she does. She talks about it. She's on social media as well, and she posts about it. I think she's actually done a podcast or two talking about grief. She says, the best advice I want to leave you with is to have compassion for yourself. Humanity has a commonality in that it is normal to have difficult feelings at times. It is normal to battle through trials. No person goes unscathed by grief. Be gentle with yourself and realize that there is no need to feel guilty or ashamed of what is a normal part of being human. Know that this is not something that has to be suffered alone. There are resources for you. You are never alone. Many wise men have said suffering is often our greatest teacher. If we can be open to learning what our hardships may have to teach us, it can transcend us, humble us, and open our hearts to what there is to offer. I know this is the last thing anyone who is grieving wants to hear. Trust me, I've been there. I rolled my eyes at the very comment. But as my favorite poet, Rumi, R-U-M-I, said, the wound is the place where the light enters. There is peace to be found in the chaos of life if you will only look for it.
Yeah.
She talks about her grief just very honestly. She's,
Mhm.
yeah, follow her for sure if you are on Instagram. Anyway, I have tons of stuff that I could have shared, and I'll find a way to share it because I really, really honor what people have put out there. Like, I have pages and pages of things that people did that stood out to each of these people
Yeah.
that actually helped. Like, it doesn't fix it. It doesn't fix it. But things that actually reached them in a profound, meaningful way that said,
Right.
like, hey, you are not alone. And this proves it. So I'll find a way to share it because I do think it's really valuable. Just a collection of insights and ideas and experiences of people who have grieved and people who have successfully supported someone grieving. So
I
we'll
know
find a
that
way.
you have walked through this space with a lot of people. Are you open to people reaching out to you to
Absolutely.
have conversations about grief or whatever?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
we'll make sure that we link
It's where
your
I
social
live
media.
now. I just live here now.
Right. Right.
But I feel like I've been kind of put in a particular place to stand in these in between spaces with people.
Yeah.
And it's benefited my own life in the sense that, like, gaining this perspective so frequently with others where, you know, when someone dies, nothing else matters. You hop on the plane, you go, you know what I mean? Everything else falls to the side.
Yeah.
Except for your closest relationships. And to see that happen over and over and over again so closely,
Mm-hmm.
it helps me keep perspective.
Yeah.
It helps me have gratitude for what I still get to hold and hug.
Yeah.
My PTSD tends to make me catastrophize. Is that the word, catastrophize?
Yeah, that's a word. Mm-hmm.
Basically, I just, when things happen, sometimes I do feel very deeply, and by feeling so deeply, my mind will sometimes go into those places where I'm like, what if I lost Justin? Like my friend lost Robin. What if I
Yeah.
lost this person, like this person left? And I can't help but to go there because I do have a lot of friends, young women, young moms, friends who are passing away. And, you know, I was rattled by a pretty difficult year with my health.
Yeah.
And so, of course, my brain kind of goes there. Ultimately, we all experience grief, and I keep on finding myself in this position to walk with people through it. And I think that that's more what it is. I think it's guiding me here. And so I just really appreciate you finding me.
And when you feel that pull to do what you are meant to do, then it all just kind of comes together, and you're given the strength that you need to be what you need to be in that space. And I think that going through this really gives us all appreciation for life and for the relationships that we have. And, you know, I know with the people that I have lost, I look back at those relationships and think, okay, if I could have a do-over, if I could do it again, what would I do differently? And then how do I want to proceed with my relationships moving forward so that I don't have those same thoughts if I lose someone else, because inevitably I will lose someone else at some point in my life. And I want to be able to look back on those relationships and think, I gave it everything. I was all in. I supported them in ways that I feel good about. And we were honest and respectful and loving and kind and all of those beautiful things. One more thing that I wanted to share before we leave today is I know over our last podcast, we talked about what not to say when dealing with grief. And so Dr. Caroline Leaf also gave us a list of things to say. So I wanted to share some of those. So when someone is grieving, some things that might be appropriate to say would be, I'm so sorry. I don't have words, but I'm here for you, whatever you need. Or I don't know what to say, but I love you and I'm here and with you. Or what do you need in this moment? Or do you want me to share some of my favorite memories about so-and-so? Or I'm available for grocery deliveries, kid pickups, babysitting, making dinner, whatever you need. Just being present makes such a huge difference. Or please know that however you're feeling right now, sad, numb, guilty, tired, angry, it's normal. There's no right way to feel. I love you. And I'm so sad that you're going through this. All very, very appropriate ways to respond to people who are dealing with grief. So grateful that Trish got to join us here today and got to share some of these beautiful stories with us and some of her walk through grief. If you would like to talk to her, I'll make sure that I link that social media in the description of this. I know she would love to hear from you. If you would like to talk to myself or Sunny, we're always available at Whole Life Vitality, or just, shoot us a DM. And I hope that you will tune in next time. Thanks, friends. We'll see you later.